Elias Monroe had lived through battles, survived strokes, and mourned the loss of his wife. Yet none of those trials prepared him for the day his quiet presence in a grocery store was mistaken for suspicion. All he wanted was his medication, yet he soon found himself facing a gun. His mornings always carried the same rhythm, unhurried but intentional. At 82, Elias walked with deliberate patience, as though each step asked time itself to slow down. His knee, damaged by shrapnel decades earlier, no longer let him move like the strong young man who once climbed hills in combat or welded steel under the Georgia sun. But his dignity was unshaken, as steady as his spine. He wasn't a man of headlines, but in Lafayette, Georgia, people knew him well. He was the neighbor who waved, who held doors, who brought tomatoes from his garden to the cashier's every Sunday. He spoke little, but he noticed everything. That morning, under a soft gray sky, he tucked a grocery list into his calloused hand and stepped out the door. The list included bread, oatmeal, blood thinners, and his late wife's inhaler. Though she had been gone for 5 years, he still refilled the prescription, part ritual, part remembrance. Each hiss of the inhaler reminded him of nights spent listening to her breathe, praying she would make it through storms. He never cried at her funeral, but the sound of that small device always tightened his throat. The drive to Riverside Market was short. Elias preferred silence in the car, letting his thoughts wander not to politics but to people. The way they glance, the way they hold their purses, the way they look at him. Arriving just after 7, he parked in his usual spot and entered the store. It was quiet as he liked it. The floors smelled of cleaning solution, the fridges hummed, and the aisles were mostly empty. He passed the bakery, nodded at Samantha the janitor, and reached the pharmacy. Ariella, the technician with large glasses and kind eyes, greeted him warmly. She told him his refill was nearly ready and asked if he wanted to sit. He refused gently. His legs hurt worse when he gave in to them. She smiled. She felt safer when he was around, even though he never said much. Leaning on a cart, Elias let his mind drift to memories of his wife humming gospel tunes on quiet mornings. But peace rarely lasts. Nearby, Nate Keller, an off-duty officer, was watching him. Dressed in his department hoodie, Nate wasn't there to shop. His gaze fixed on Elias, whose army green jacket and stillness unsettled him. To Keller, Elias wasn't an elderly man waiting for his prescription. He was a potential threat. Haunted by the memory of his father dying alone in a parking lot while bystanders ignored him, Keller had grown hypervigilant. Now, still grieving, he saw danger where none existed. When Elias briefly looked back at him, he recognized that gaze, the look of suspicion he had seen many times in his life. That was the beginning of the storm. Nate Keller hadn't planned to follow Elias Monroe into the store. At least, that's what he told himself. He often parked at Riverside Market after his shift, sitting in his truck with a cup of bitter coffee, letting the engine tick cool while he watched people come and go. It was a habit he'd never shaken from patrol duty. That morning, though, one figure caught his attention. An older man stepping from an aging Camry, jacket zipped tight despite mild weather, each step slow and deliberate. To Keller, men who moved with such measured calm fit one of 2 molds, trained and disciplined or hiding something. The jacket, military-style, army green, stirred unease deep inside him. His father had worn one just like it, back when Nate was still a boy learning how to read silence before words. That memory was heavy, always pulling him backward. Nate's father had survived Vietnam, but not the quiet battles at home. One morning, he collapsed in a Circle K parking lot, clutching his chest. Strangers passed by without lifting a hand to help. By the time someone called 911, it was too late. The man who had taught Nate vigilance had died because no one else cared to look closer. That moment shaped Nate's vision of the world. Since then, every still figure seemed suspect, every quiet pause a warning. So when he saw Elias standing motionless near the pharmacy counter, hands folded calmly over the cart, Nate's chest tightened. He didn't see an old man waiting for his medicine. He saw a puzzle missing pieces. Why wasn't he moving? Why did he glance around? Why linger? To Nate, it looked like staging, like someone biding time before trouble began. He pushed through the sliding doors, ignoring the nod of the aging security guard, and started down the aisles. His hand drifted toward his holster, not drawn yet but ready. As he closed in, he felt the thrum of thoughts in his head. What if he's armed? What if this is the moment no one else sees coming? Meanwhile, Elias remained still, neither frightened nor aggressive, simply grounded. That stillness rattled Nate more than any raised voice could have. He approached, throat tight, voice sharper than intended. Hands up. Now. The command cracked through the store. Elias didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply lifted his hands slowly, like a man who had been through worse but never got used to it. Around them, the air shifted. The hum of refrigerators seemed louder. Shoppers froze, uncertain but alert. From another aisle, Leticia Ramos, a janitor restocking bleach, caught the reflection of the two men in a convex mirror. She saw the tension, the way Keller stiffened, the way Elias stood steady. Not confrontational, not afraid, just centered. Something was wrong, she knew, and quietly slipped toward the security office. Back at the counter, Ariella handed Elias his small brown bag of medication just moments before the tension snapped. Now she stood frozen, heart racing as the officer barked commands. Elias remained steady, whispering to himself, "Not today." But Keller's finger hovered too close to his holster, his fear mixing with grief, his past colliding with the present. The line between memory and reality was vanishing, and Elias Monroe was at the center of it. The sharp command from Keller's mouth didn't just echo. It spread like a ripple through the grocery store. People froze mid-step, carts stilled, and voices sank into silence. A little girl clutched her mother's leg, pulling her away from the open aisle. Near the floral section, an older woman stepped back from a bouquet of tulips, watching the tension unfold. Elias stood motionless, arms raised, heart steady though his body ached from stiffness. His gaze didn't waver from Keller's face. He wasn't looking at the weapon or the badge, but at the man behind them, a young officer whose eyes revealed not rage but fear. Around them, time seemed to pause. No one shouted. No one interfered. But the weight of the moment pressed against everyone's ribs. In aisle 6, a teenage employee named Jamie crouched behind shelves of cereal boxes, peeking out with wide eyes. He recognized Elias. Just last week, the man had asked him about his college plans while checking out. Now that same gentle customer stood at gunpoint. Jamie's chest tightened, not with fear for himself but with disbelief that kindness could be mistaken for danger. Others watched too. Yvonne Carter, a retired trauma nurse, gripped her cart tightly, scanning Elias's face. She'd seen fear before, in countless forms, but Elias didn't look afraid. He looked prepared, braced in the way someone does when they know survival depends on calm. Malik, the store's aging security guard, stood by the entrance. He wasn't armed, wasn't trained for this, but he didn't look away. Neither did Lenny Dixon, a wiry Vietnam veteran who recognized Elias from years ago. He remembered Elias pulling men from wreckage in a firefight decades earlier. Seeing him now, standing with hands raised in his own hometown grocery store, felt like history replaying itself under different uniforms. Keller's breathing grew louder in his own ears, his palms slick on the grip of his weapon. This wasn't going the way training drills had prepared him. The man in front of him wasn't shouting, wasn't resisting, he was simply still. And that stillness felt like a mirror, reflecting Keller's own unease. Then, from the cereal aisle, a voice finally broke the silence. Yvonne stepped forward slightly and spoke firmly. "That man's name is Elias Monroe. He's my neighbor. He brings tomatoes to our porch every Sunday. That jacket you're afraid of? He earned it." Her voice didn't tremble, carried the weight of truth. Keller flinched, eyes darting toward her, but Elias remained calm, barely shifting. Another voice followed. Leticia Ramos, the janitor, stepped out from behind an aisle. "His wife used to leave flowers on my grandmother's grave. He never asked for anything, he just gave." She kept her hands visible, her tone gentle. "You don't know what you're doing, officer, but you know it isn't right." Jamie rose slowly from behind the shelves, knees shaking, voice cracking but steady with conviction. He talks to me about college. He tells me to take my time when I answer. That's not the kind of man who waits to cause trouble. That's the kind of man who waits because life always gives him a reason to. The silence deepened. Keller's grip faltered, his weapon trembling slightly. Elias finally spoke, voice soft but piercing. You're not looking at me. You're looking at a memory. If you need to be right, you'll pull that trigger. But if you're ready to be honest, you'll put the gun away. For a moment, no one moved. Then another veteran's voice, Lenny's, rang out low and steady. Lower it, son. You're shaking, and I don't want to watch you live with what comes next. Keller's arms quivered, his jaw tight, and slowly, inch by inch, the barrel of the weapon dropped. The store exhaled as one. The moment the gun lowered, relief didn't rush in like a flood. Came slow, fragile, uncertain. No one applauded, no one cried out. Shoppers remained still, as though even breathing too loudly might shatter the fragile calm. Elias exhaled just enough to steady himself, arms aching from holding them raised so long. He collected his medication from Ariella, who slid the bag across the counter with trembling hands. I appreciate your patience, he told her quietly. Keller stood frozen, weapon holstered now but shame heavy on his shoulders. Around him, the crowd didn't jeer or protest. They simply watched. Their silence said enough. He turned, walking out of the store with slow, heavy steps, each one echoing louder than it should. No one stopped him, but no one looked away either. Elias, meanwhile, continued his shopping. He picked up oatmeal, bread, and other items from his list, his body heavier than when he'd entered. At the checkout, the cashier tried to waive his bill, but Elias refused. I don't need favors, he said softly. Just a receipt. He paid, took his groceries, and left as deliberately as he had arrived. Outside, another older man in the lot simply nodded to him. No words were exchanged, but the gesture carried recognition. I saw what happened. I'll carry it too. Elias drove home in silence, letting the weight of the morning settle. That night, in his small house filled with memories of his late wife, he set down his groceries and sat at the dining table. He looked at a photograph of her, remembered her voice, and whispered into the empty room, I didn't even move, but somehow that made me dangerous. He opened a wooden box filled with medals, heavy reminders of sacrifices made overseas. Yet he knew now, uniforms and honors didn't shield you from being unseen. Across town, Keller sat alone in his apartment. He dropped his keys, splashed water on his face, and stared at his reflection. What haunted him wasn't Elias's eyes but his stillness. So calm, so practiced, it revealed Keller's own turmoil. He realized he hadn't seen Elias at all. He had only seen his father's ghost. His instincts, once his compass, now felt broken. He scribbled on a notepad, I didn't see him. I saw fear wearing his jacket. It was the only way he could process what had happened. In the days that followed, quiet ripples spread. Neighbors spoke of the moment in hushed tones. At City Council, a small ordinance passed requiring clearer verification before calling police on suspicious individuals. It became known quietly as the Monroe Mandate. Elias hadn't asked for it, but change had found his name anyway. At church the following Sunday, Elias sat in the back pew, listening as a hymn floated gently through the air. No one asked him what happened. That was mercy. After service, a boy approached shyly and asked, Were you scared? Elias answered honestly, Not of dying. I was scared of becoming invisible. He pressed an old grocery list, his wife's handwriting, into the boy's hands, a reminder that people are more than assumptions. Later, on his porch, Elias sipped tea, watching children play and neighbors pass. Peace hadn't arrived in grand gestures, but it returned in small, steady ways. And though his name would never make headlines, his stillness had spoken loudly enough to change something. Justice, he knew, wasn't always thunderous. Sometimes it arrived as quiet as the breath you hold and release when the danger finally passes.